They fined me $450 for stepping 1 foot across the fence line, even though the property survey shows that strip belongs to me by 2.4 feet. I measured it twice before sunrise, under a flashlight, shaking with disbelief. 2 days later, she called the cops. Welcome to HOA Fallout. I'm Eric Dalton, a building inspector from Denton, Texas, and this is the story that almost cost me my home, and then changed how our entire neighborhood runs. If you're new here, I'd be honored to have you subscribe. Folks around 50 or so, you'll especially understand what it's like when the rules stop making sense. Tell me, where are you watching from tonight? I moved into Maple Ridge Estates in March of last year, a 2-acre lot carved out of former ranch land. It was supposed to be peace after my wife's passing. She left me the old dog, the garden tools, and a wish that I keep building something that matters. That phrase echoed when I signed the closing papers. But by May, that wish was buried under violation notices. The first letter came folded neat pink slip stapled on top. Unauthorized fencing variance, Section 4.2b. The fence had been there when I bought the place. The second letter accused me of unapproved soil grading because I'd filled 2 ruts near the gate, each fine stacked like bricks, $150, $300, $450. And every time I tried to explain, the HOA president, Cheryl Mann, smiled that pinched lip smile and said, "We enforce evenly, Mr. Dalton. If you can't comply, perhaps this isn't your community." I remember gripping the edge of her clipboard so tight the metal clip creaked. "My fence line's on the survey. You can't just claim the strip." She shrugged. "Then sue us." That night, I spread every document across my kitchen table. The deed, closing statement, even the plat map the county recorded. I found the coordinates again, 197.4 feet from the corner marker to the oak tree. Her citation measured from the wrong post entirely. My anger went cold instead of hot, cold enough to plan. 2 days later, I was loading mulch when I saw 2 police cruisers creeping up the gravel. Cheryl stood behind them, red dress bright against the dust. She pointed at me like a traffic cone. One officer waved. "Sir, we got a call about trespassing onto HOA common property." I handed him the laminated survey I'd already clipped to the mailbox. "Before you write anything, read the legal description." The younger officer scanned it, frowned, and whispered to his partner. Cheryl's lips tightened. The older cop finally said, "Ma'am, this looks like his parcel." They left after 5 minutes. Cheryl stormed off, heels stabbing the dirt. But that moment marked the start of her campaign. Daily emails about property compliance. Anonymous notes on my windshield. "You don't belong here." A petition circulated to protect neighborhood standards. I kept everything. Dates, photos, envelopes. That night, my neighbor Tom, retired electrician, coffee thermos permanently in hand, knocked on my porch rail. "You know she did this to the Jenkins last year. They moved." He slid a manila folder toward me. "Old board minutes. Might help you see the pattern." Inside were scanned pages with half-erased highlights, budget tables, and something odd. Line items labeled legal consulting, parcel access review. I asked, "Access to what?" He said, "The drainage easement. Runs behind our fences. City kept it public, but she's been treating it like HOA land." I sat there, hearing the cicadas and feeling the first spark of control return. If she was wrong about that easement, she'd overreached on mine too. Knowledge nugget number 1. In Texas, a recorded plat and its easements supersede any HOA covenant if there's a conflict. The law treats the county record as controlling public notice. Next morning I pulled county GIS maps, water department permits, and the development's 2003 plat. Sure enough, that HOA strip was a 15-foot drainage easement retained by the city, meaning Cheryl's claim of ownership was false, and every fine tied to it was voidable. Still, I didn't move yet. People who rush lose leverage. Tom grinned when I showed him. "So what's your play?" "Paper," I said. "Lots of it." I drafted certified letters requesting disclosure of all enforcement votes under Section 551 of the Texas Property Code. I timed each mailing with coffee and calm breathing. 3 letters in 10 days, all unanswered. Perfect. Silence would build my record. Meanwhile, I started attending open meetings quietly, just to listen. Cheryl's voice carried that practiced civility that makes your jaw ache. We must maintain property values. Each time she said it, I pictured my wife's tomato vines curling over the same fence she called non-compliant. The wound twisted into resolve. I wasn't just fighting for space. I was fighting to stop her from erasing the small freedoms that make a place feel like home. By July 12th, I'd gathered enough data to map every fine issued in the last 2 years, 47 total, 32 to owners along that same easement line. That pattern wasn't enforcement, it was targeting. The next step required patience and the right ally, one who could navigate property law without blinking. That's when I met attorney Lisa Herrera, municipal law specialist, always smelling faintly of toner and lime seltzer. She read my packet, tapped her pen twice. They're enforcing on land they don't own. That's a gift, Mr. Dalton. Don't waste it. I asked what she meant. Buy the paper they ignored, she said. Then wait. Her idea sounded reckless at first. But by the time I drove home, the logic settled like gravel under tires. If the HOA kept claiming authority over public easement ground, maybe the key was to acquire rights they couldn't see coming. And that's where my quiet war truly began. Lisa helped me set up a small holding entity, Dalton E. Acement Trust LLC, registered to a P.O. box in Denton. Cost me $212 to file, 2 signatures, and 1 notary stamp. By August 3rd, that LLC officially held a 10-year lease from the city over the 15-foot drainage easement behind our properties. I didn't need to fence it, build on it, or touch it, just hold the usage rights. Knowledge nugget number 2. Under Texas Local Government Code Power 272-2001, municipalities can lease narrow public easements for maintenance or landscaping, provided it doesn't restrict access. Most HOAs never check those notices because they assume common area control. I did all this quietly, no announcement, no ripples. I even mowed the easement on schedule so Cheryl's drones, yes, she flew one, would see compliance. What she didn't know, the trespass strip she threatened me over now legally belonged to my LLC for the next decade. That Saturday, the HOA meeting was held in the community center. Cold lemonade in styrofoam cups, the smell of carpet glue thick in the air. Cheryl was in red again, flanked by her vice president, Mark Hiller, whose handshake felt like a wet sponge. She opened the meeting by declaring, "We've had another incident of unauthorized lawn work near the drainage area." Everyone turned toward me. I raised my hand. "That's my maintenance lease area. Recorded August 3rd. She froze for half a second before recovering. "We'll review that claim," she said smoothly. "Meanwhile, please refrain from further encroachment." I could have pushed right there, but restraint wins wars. Instead, I smiled. Of course, review away. Half the neighbors avoided eye contact. The other half looked intrigued. Afterward, Tom caught me outside. "She's rattled," he whispered, "but she'll double down. That's her way." He was right. 2 days later, a code compliance inspector, city, not HOA, showed up unannounced. "Routine drainage check," he said. Clip. Board already damp from the humidity. 10 minutes later, he left shaking his head. "Everything's fine here." That night I received an email blast from the HOA. "Community alert. Drainage safety violations under review. No signature, but we all knew whose keyboard typed it." I replied only once. "Please provide documentation under Section 209-0051E." That section forces HOAs to produce records within 10 business days. They didn't. Another violation logged. About mid-part through, let me ask you, are you firmly anti-HOA, or have you ever faced one that crossed the line? If you have, drop one tactic you've used to stand your ground. And if you haven't yet, leave a message here for the board members who might be reading. Some of them always lurk. By September, the harassment phase began full swing. Petty citations stacked in my mailbox like poker chips, trash bin placement, mailbox color fade, overwatering. One afternoon, 2 officers arrived again. Wellness check, they called it. Apparently someone had reported yelling on my property. The only yelling was a college game on TV. Knowledge nugget number 3. False or malicious reports to law enforcement can constitute abuse of official process under Texas Penal Code, Bowers 39.02, especially when made by those in quasi-official positions like HOA officers. I documented each encounter with date, badge number, and time. Every photo had metadata saved twice, cloud and flash drive. Tom called it the Dalton dossier. The emotional cost was heavier. I'd find myself checking the window before stepping outside, waiting for headlights to slow by the driveway. My late wife used to say, "Courage doesn't mean you aren't scared, it means you act while shaking." So I acted. Lisa suggested patience until the annual HOA financial meeting in October. "That's when they reveal budgets," she said, "and when we can quietly show your ownership rights intersect their expenditure claims." "Won't they realize what's coming?" I asked. "They won't read until it's too late," she replied, sipping her lime seltzer. "People like Cheryl believe authority is immunity. They never imagine they're the subject of enforcement." October came with thick humidity and a sense of anticipation. I wore my inspection badge, not because I needed to, but because symbols matter. The meeting opened with routine chatter about landscaping contracts and snow readiness. Then Cheryl announced, "The board has approved $7,800 for legal counsel to reclaim the drainage easement." I raised my hand again. "You mean the easement leased by Dalton Easement Trust?" Her pen froze midair. Mark leaned in, whispering something. She looked back at me and said, "We're within our rights." I set a single folded document on the table, the certified lease agreement, signed by the city manager, notarized, with the stamp gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "Actually," I said quietly, "you're about to misuse association funds on property the city already leased. That's a fiduciary breach." Silence thickened. Tom later told me he counted 12 full seconds before anyone breathed. That was reversal number 1, though no one knew it yet except Lisa and me. I left the document there, face up, and walked out before they could recover. Behind me, the murmurs began. Over the next week, emails flew like gnats. Urgent board meetings, budget freezes, attorney consultations. I kept calm, pruning the garden, repairing my mailbox, nodding to neighbors who finally waved again. For the first time in months, I felt control settling in my bones. I wasn't just fighting for my fence anymore. I was fighting to make sure no one else had to measure peace in inches. Now here's a question that's haunted me since. How far should an HOA really control what happens beyond your fence? Where's the legal line between community standard and private property? Let me know what you think below, because that's the fight happening in every cul-de-sac across this country. The board called an emergency session 3 nights later. I didn't attend. I wanted them to stew without me. Instead, I sat on the porch with Tom, watching the streetlights hum over the cul-de-sac. He passed me his thermos. "They're scared, Eric. That's new." I nodded, feeling the tension ease a bit in my shoulders. "Fear makes people sloppy," I said. "They'll break their own bylaws trying to fix mine." And they did. Within a week, they issued a special assessment proposal to fund legal recovery, $200 per household, due November 15th. The problem? Their bylaws required a 2/3 member vote for any assessment exceeding $100. They skipped the vote entirely. Knowledge nugget number 4. In most states, special assessments beyond routine maintenance thresholds require a supermajority of homeowner approval, typically 67%. Enforcing one without a vote is an automatic fiduciary violation. Lisa smiled when she saw the notice. "That's your domino, Eric. You just have to tap it." She helped me file a pre-suit mediation notice. Simple, 1 page, citing breach of governing documents and misuse of member funds. It wasn't even about winning yet. It was about positioning. The next board meeting would be the showdown. Before that meeting, the harassment ramped up like clockwork. Someone left a dead plant on my porch with a note. "Your yard's next." The HOA website posted my name in a delinquent compliance list, even though I owed nothing. When I called the webmaster, he said, "Ma'am, sorry sir, they told me you'd already moved." It's funny how intimidation feels different when you expect it. I took photos of everything, each time-stamped, even the wilted fern. My body still clenched sometimes, remembering my wife's final hospital nights. How she'd squeeze my hand and whisper, "Promise me you won't let the house go." That promise had become my compass through all of this. I want to ask why. How's something straight? What's your limit? How high would a fine have to climb before you'd fight back? $250, $500, $1,000. Drop your number below. Justice or revenue scheme? Where do you draw the line? October 28th, 7 o'clock p.m. The HOA's special budget session. The fluorescent lights flickered over 60 folding chairs. I sat in the back, wearing my county work jacket. Cheryl opened the floor, her voice brittle but steady. Tonight's vote is procedural. The special assessment will ensure legal clarity. I raised my hand, slow and deliberate. According to Section 5.3c, you need a 2/3 homeowner vote before imposing any assessment over $100. You didn't have one. She snapped. Mr. Dalton, this is not a court. Not yet, I said. That got a murmur from the crowd. Even Mark's pen stopped clicking. I handed Lisa a sealed envelope, our pre-suit mediation notice, to deliver formally. The sound of it landing on the table echoed louder than expected. Then came the moment I hadn't predicted. A voice from the third row, Mrs. Jenkins, the widow who'd moved out last year, stood up. They did the same to me, she said quietly. They fined me until I sold. Another neighbor added, and me, over a garden shed. That meeting turned from procedural to confessional within minutes. Cheryl tried to restore order, banging her gavel, but the questions drowned her out. Where's the money going? Who hired your attorney? Did we vote on any of this? When she finally dismissed the meeting, her face was pale as chalk. Lisa leaned toward me. You just cracked the facade. Now they'll overreact again. Wait for it. She was right. 2 days later, I got another trespass warning stapled to my mailbox, this time with a bold red header. Final notice. The irony made me laugh out loud. The land they claimed I was trespassing on was leased to me. Their notice technically accused me of trespassing on my own leasehold. Tom shook his head when I showed him. You gonna sue now? Not yet, I said. Let them keep writing. Every letter is a nail. I spent November documenting every violation of process, every unsigned notice, every missing vote count. The pile grew so thick I had to label folders. Fines, assessments, false reports, board minutes, recorded calls. Each binder tab was a story of overreach. I started hearing from other residents, emails at first, then knocks on my door. They fined me for having kids' toys on the porch. They said my flag bracket was the wrong color. They made me repaint my shutters twice. The HOA's power worked because everyone felt alone. That isolation was breaking. And that's when I knew. The next board meeting wasn't just about me anymore. It would be about every homeowner who'd been silenced by bureaucracy disguised as community standards. The date was set, December 6th, the annual General Assembly. That would be the night I brought the paper mountain to the podium. But before that, I still had one last preparation, an unshakable piece of evidence they couldn't argue with. The evidence I needed came from a source Cheryl never expected, her own emails. During one of my routine records requests, the HOA's secretary accidentally attached the full thread of board correspondence instead of just the minutes. I opened the PDF and read slowly, my pulse loud in my ears. Need to make Dalton an example, Cheryl had written on September 8th. If we can't enforce that strip, the whole drainage setback becomes useless. Push inspection frequency to weekly until he yields. There it was, in her own words. Selective enforcement, premeditated harassment, and misuse of authority. I printed 3 copies, sealed them in plastic sleeves, and logged the metadata. 1 copy for Lisa, 1 for city code compliance, 1 for me. Lisa stared at the email chain in my kitchen that night. This is the nail, Eric. The statute calls that retaliatory action under color of office. It's civil, maybe criminal if she used HOA funds to coordinate. She flipped a page, and it looks like she did. I didn't feel triumph, just a quiet tightening in my chest, the kind that comes when the finish line finally appears through the fog. We'll use it at the assembly, I said. Lisa nodded. And make sure there's a neutral authority present. The police or the city inspector, they'll confirm what's legal on the spot. The next week was a blur of paperwork and sleepless nights. Cheryl's faction started whisper campaigns. Dalton's a squatter. Dalton's suing everyone. Dalton's dangerous. But gossip doesn't stick when truth is time-stamped. Tom helped me assemble the binders, each section color-coded, page-numbered, tabbed. When we closed the final binder ring, the metallic snap echoed like a gun chambering. That night on the porch, Tom asked, "You ready for them to hate you before they thank you?" "I've inspected burned-out buildings and seen worse," I said. "Hatred's just smoke before the air clears." Midway through that week, Cheryl tried a new tactic. A certified letter arrived marked Violation Escalation, Property Value Risk. It accused me of unauthorized communications with other members. Essentially, she was fining me for talking to neighbors. I laughed, couldn't help it. That laughter, short and sharp, startled me. Maybe it was relief. Maybe I'd crossed the point where fear turns into purpose. And I'll throw this one out to you. Should HOAs even have the right to limit neighbor-to-neighbor conversations about their governance? Is that order or oppression? Let me know where you'd draw that boundary. On December 6th, the assembly hall was packed. Nearly every homeowner, some standing along the walls. The air was hot with anticipation and winter coats. I carried the binders in a file box, numbered tabs visible through the clear lid, the sound of gravel crunching under my boots outside the hall reminded me of that first police visit months earlier. Cheryl called the meeting to order. Her smile was strained but practiced. "Before we begin," she said, "I'd like to remind everyone that disruptions or unauthorized recordings are prohibited under our bylaws." Lisa leaned close and whispered, "Actually, you're in a one-party consent state. You can record as long as you're a participant." Knowledge nugget number 5. In one-party consent states, recording a public HOA meeting is lawful if you're present and participating. Recordings can later serve as admissible evidence in civil disputes. I pressed record on my phone, placed it face up on the table. Cheryl saw it and hesitated but said nothing. The agenda rolled through budget lines and landscaping bids until she reached legal matters. That's when I stood. "Madam President, I'd like to address Agenda Item 4.3, the enforcement of easement areas." A hush spread. Cheryl's gavel hovered midair. "Proceed," she said tightly. I lifted the lease document first. "This is the official record from the City of Denton, granting Dalton Easement Trust LLC lawful usage rights for the 15-foot drainage strip, recorded August 3rd, meaning every enforcement action on that area since then has been invalid." Gasps, murmurs. Cheryl's cheeks flushed crimson. "That lease was never disclosed to this board." "Correct," I said, "because you never requested public notice filings." Then I opened Binder 1 and placed it on the podium. "Here are your own enforcement notices, dated, unsigned, and improperly voted." Binder 2. Financial disbursements exceeding $7,800 without a 2/3 homeowner vote. Binder 3. Internal communications, including an email stating, and I quote, "Make Dalton an example." Her gavel struck hard. "That's private correspondence." "Not when it concerns misuse of member funds," Lisa interjected smoothly. She stepped forward, calm as stone. "I'm Ms. Herrera, Mr. Dalton's counsel. We're not seeking damages tonight. We're seeking correction." A uniformed city code officer in the back stepped closer. I'd invited him the day before. "For record," he said, "the drainage easement remains under city ownership and lease. The HOA has no enforcement authority there." That sentence detonated the room. Voices rose, some cheering, others shouting. Cheryl tried to shout over them, "We'll adjourn. This is out of order." But it wasn't out of order anymore. It was justice in real time. That was the public set piece, the point of no return. I left the podium as the officer verified the lease, and the crowd's murmur turned into open revolt. The board scrambled to recess, but the homeowners surrounded the table, demanding answers. Outside, the night air was cold, sharp with winter dust. Tom joined me on the steps, laughing quietly. "You didn't just win, Eric. You detonated the whole illusion." I looked back through the glass doors where Cheryl stood cornered by her own paperwork. "No," I said softly. "I just returned the law to where it belonged." But I knew this wasn't the end. The dominoes were just beginning to fall, and power never surrenders without one last desperate swing. The aftermath of that night unfolded like thunder echoing down a valley, slow at first, then shaking every window. By dawn, half the neighborhood's group chat was screenshots and disbelief. "Did you hear what Dalton said? She forged the claim. The cop confirmed it." By noon, Cheryl's husband had removed her name from the HOA website's president's message. By evening, 2 board members resigned, pending legal review. And by the end of that week, their attorney, one I'd seen pacing the hallway in loafers, quietly withdrew representation. But power rarely dies quietly. Cheryl struck back the only way left to her, through bureaucracy. A new packet arrived in my mailbox, heavier than any before, stamped comprehensive property audit. 62 pages of alleged violations, each more absurd than the last. Grass height, porch light wattage, excessive decorative rock density. I almost admired her persistence. Lisa said it best over the phone. They're burning their own fuel now. Let them. Still, living through it wasn't easy. The harassment took its toll. My mail vanished twice. Someone loosened the screws on my mailbox post. The old fear crept back during quiet nights, the kind where every creak sounds like intrusion. I'd wake sweating, remembering hospital machines and my wife's fading breath. She'd said, "Keep building something that matters." I whispered that line like a prayer. To protect myself, I filed an incident log with the Denton County Sheriff's Office. Not a complaint, just a record. Paper beats rumor every time. And let me throw this to you. What should the punishment be for HOA officers who trespass, harass, or falsify reports? Fines, removal, criminal charges? What precedent should we be setting nationwide? December stretched on like molasses. Each day, more residents reached out privately. "Eric, we want a fair board. How do we remove them? Can you help us draft something?" I didn't want to become their hero, but sometimes leadership happens by default. So I built what inspectors call chain of custody. Every homeowner statement went in labeled envelopes. 22 signatures total. Together, they formed what would become our petition for a special recall election. On January 9th, we served the notice to the board's P.O. box and hand-delivered one to Cheryl's porch. She opened the door before I left, eyes sharp as glass. "You think you've won something?" she hissed. "Not yet," I said, "but you're about to." The recall hearing date was set for January 28th. Open attendance, city observer required. It would be the final reckoning. Meanwhile, I kept reinforcing the foundation. Financial audits, verification of membership rolls, even insurance correspondence. We found discrepancies. 3 accounts paid to Man Consulting, Cheryl's maiden name. The total, $11,200 over 2 years. Misappropriation disguised as consulting. Tom nearly spit out his coffee when I showed him. "That's theft, plain and simple." "Misuse of association funds," Lisa corrected. "But yes, criminal if intent's proven." Those days felt electric. The air buzzed with something between dread and hope. For the first time, the community walked their dogs together again, waved at one another. The invisible fences Cheryl built between neighbors were breaking down. And here's a thought I've wrestled with. Are HOA rules meant to preserve beauty or just control it? What happens when enforcement becomes performance? Drop your take in the comments, or at least like the video so more folks ask the same. 3 nights before the recall, rain came down in sheets. I stood on my porch watching water race along the very drainage easement Cheryl once claimed as hers. The lights from passing cars shimmered across the wet pavement. That's when I saw a shadow move by the fence, someone out there, flashlight sweeping. I called out, no answer. The beam snapped off, footsteps retreating fast into the dark. I filed it in the log. 2 days later, the sheriff's deputy called me back. "We checked your report. Security camera from a nearby house caught a woman matching Mrs. Mann's description near your property around midnight. You want to press trespass?" I thought for a long moment, feeling the weight of every month behind me. "Not yet," I said. "Let's handle it in the open first." Because the recall wasn't just about removing her. It was about reforming everything that let her thrive unchecked. On the morning of January 28th, the air carried that odd stillness before a storm. I shaved police, shed my boots, and packed 3 binders. Evidence, finance, reform proposal. Lisa met me at the hall's entrance with a nod. "You ready?" I smiled faintly. "As ready as the paper is thick." Inside, every seat was taken. The city observer, a calm man named Officer Raines, stood near the podium. Cheryl sat stiff-backed, eyes rimmed red, a final attempt at control flickering behind exhaustion. It was time to end it. Officer Raines stood at the front table, clipboard steady, voice calm. We'll proceed according to the HOA's own bylaws, he said. Ballots are counted in open view. Any interference will be noted. His presence alone changed the air in that hall. Neutral authority, the thing Cheryl had always feared most. Lisa whispered, "Remember, we don't gloat, we guide." I nodded, my pulse still thudded in my fingertips. The recall meeting began at 6:05 p.m. sharp. Cheryl tried to sound composed. Tonight's proceedings concern alleged mismanagement, which I categorically deny. "Save it for the minutes," someone shouted. She shot a glare but continued reading from a prepared statement until a homeowner interrupted. "We've all seen the emails." That broke the dam. Voices rose, chairs scraped. I waited, letting the chaos burn out before stepping forward with the reform packet tucked under my arm. "Everyone," I said, steady and low. "We can fight or we can fix." I brought evidence, but more importantly, I brought a way forward. I opened the binder to the first page. Here's what I'm proposing. A full forensic audit of finances, term limits for officers, 2 consecutive years max, mandatory disclosure of conflicts of interest, and open records access for every homeowner. Someone in the back clapped once, then again. Soon half the room joined. Cheryl's knuckles went white around her pen. Lisa placed the second binder on the table, this one sealed in clear plastic with a city seal visible underneath, the notarized lease and her attorney opinion letter confirming its validity. "This document proves the HOA had no authority over Mr. Dalton's property," she said. "Any continued enforcement would expose the board to civil liability and potential removal under Texas Property Code FAR 209 0051 on H." Raines nodded. "Noted for record." Cheryl tried to pivot. "Even if the lease is valid, it sets a dangerous precedent. Individuals shouldn't own common easements." I met her eyes. "You mean individuals shouldn't own your power? That's what scares you." That line landed harder than I expected. The crowd quieted like a wave pulling back. Raines began counting ballots, each homeowner raising a colored card, blue for recall, yellow against. My heart hammered as the stack grew. When the final card lifted, he tallied under the fluorescent glare. 39 for recall, 9 against. The motion carries. The room erupted. Cheers, sighs, the clatter of chairs. Cheryl stood frozen, still holding her pen like a sword with no blade. Raines approached her quietly. "Ma'am, per bylaw 7.4, please surrender association keys and electronic credentials. You remain subject to audit review." That was reversal number 1 fully realized. The secret leverage turned into lawful removal. Outside, under the sodium lights, neighbors crowded around me. Tom grinned so wide his thermos nearly slipped. "You did it, Eric." "No," I said, exhaling. "We did." Lisa packed her folders. "Now comes the second half," she murmured. "Turning victory into reform. Otherwise, the next Cheryl will rise in a year." The domino collapse began immediately. Within 48 hours, the HOA's insurer opened an internal inquiry into mismanagement claims. Local reporters called it the Maple Ridge Revolt. The County Ethics Board requested meeting minutes. The HOA's bank froze its operating account pending verification. Knowledge nugget number 6. Once an HOA's directors are found in breach of fiduciary duty, insurers can suspend directors. Officers coverage under Standard Clause 3C until audits confirm compliance. For the first time in months, I slept with the window open, the scent of wet cedar drifting through the screen. The fear that used to coil behind every sound was gone. But peace wasn't the end goal. Transparency was. Over the following weeks, Lisa drafted our reform charter, a binding amendment that required open budgets, published meeting recordings, and capped annual dues increases at 5%. We gathered signatures in driveways, at mailboxes, even during morning dog walks. By February 10th, we had 74 of 80 homeowners signed. Tom looked at the stack of papers. "That's a landslide." "Not yet official," I said. "We still need the board to ratify it, or the state ombuds will." He laughed. "After all this, you think they'll dare say no?" Still, I'd learned never to underestimate stubbornness. Cheryl might have been gone, but her loyalists lingered. Quiet, bitter, planning appeals. We had to seal the reform legally, make it bulletproof. And so, we prepared for the final negotiation, the exchange of leverage for lasting structure. Before I tell you how that unfolded, let me ask, when you win a fight like this, would you trade revenge for reform? Or do you believe justice only counts when someone pays the price? I'm curious where you stand. The mediation room smelled faintly of old coffee and copier toner, that bureaucratic perfume that always means change is near. 2 months after the recall, we sat at a long laminate table, Lisa and I on one side, the interim board and their counsel on the other. Cheryl wasn't present. Her attorney had filed a no-contact stipulation after the insurer froze her coverage, but her shadow hung over every clause we discussed. The board's lawyer, a nervous man with ink smudged on his cuffs, cleared his throat. "Mr. Dalton, Ms. Herrera, we're prepared to settle the pending disputes if the community accepts a compliance audit and WIT. The draws further action." Lisa leaned forward, voice measured. "Our condition is structural reform, not silence. We want the HOA rebuilt, not repainted." I slid a single page across the table, the reform charter draft, the one 74 homeowners had already signed. "This isn't revenge, it's a new operating manual." The lawyer scanned it, eyebrows tightening at each bullet. Term limits. 2 consecutive years maximum for board members. Mandatory open records access to financials, posted monthly. Annual third-party audit filed with the county clerk. Public vote required for any assessment over $250. Community access charter, establishing open green space and public easement respect. He sighed. "You're asking us to strip half the board's discretionary power." "That's the point," I said. "Power doesn't belong behind closed doors." For a long moment, no one spoke. The hum of the HVAC filled the silence until the interim president, a soft-spoken teacher named Maria Lopez, finally said, "If this is what it takes to heal, I'll sign." One by one, the others followed. The lawyer's pen scratched last, reluctant but final. Lisa slid the signed page into a plastic sleeve. "Congratulations, Eric. Reversal number 2. It felt quieter than I imagined. No applause, no cinematic music. Just the soft sound of a zipper closing around a document that meant our neighborhood could finally breathe. Still, the story wasn't finished. The insurer's audit unearthed $14,800 in misappropriated funds, most traced back to Cheryl's consulting invoices. The county DA's office pursued restitution and probation, not jail. Fair, not cruel. She lost her realtor license within the month. And here's one for debate. Should HOA officers who abuse authority face criminal penalties, or is civil restitution enough? Drop your take below. I'd love to know where fairness ends and deterrence begins. 2 weeks later, the HOA held its first open-air meeting in the park. Folding chairs circled under string lights, kids played tag in the grass, and Tom brought his old thermos filled with lemonade this time instead of coffee. Maria opened the meeting with a line that still sticks with me. "A community isn't defined by its rules, but by how it forgives after enforcing them." The next order of business was symbolic. The renaming of the drainage easement walkway. They asked me to choose the name. I thought for a while, then said, "Let's call it Harmony Strip." The motion passed unanimously. Visual beat number 2 came naturally. The sound of the metal sign being bolted into the soil, sunlight flaring off the letters, Harmony Strip, Public Easement Trail, 2024. For the first time since this began, I let myself smile without checking over my shoulder. That evening I walked the trail alone, gravel crunching under my boots, the same sound that used to mean confrontation. Now it meant peace. The air smelled of cut grass and new paint. The hum of streetlights replaced the siren echoes of last year. Tom caught up halfway down the path, his shadow long beside mine. "So," he said, "what's next for the famous Mr. Dalton?" I laughed softly. "Maybe nothing. Maybe rest." He nudged me. "You're not built for rest. You'll find another fire to put out." He was right, of course, because once you've seen how power can twist small spaces, cul-de-sacs, bylaws, smiles, you can't unsee it. Before the night ended, I turned back toward the houses, porch lights blinking one by one as people settled into homes that finally felt theirs again. That's when I realized, this fight was never about fences or fines. It was about belonging. Spring came early that year, warm air rolling through the pecan trees, soft rains rinsing away the winter grit. I woke one morning to find a handwritten note on my porch. "Oh, thank you for giving us our neighborhood back." No signature, just neat cursive on lined paper. I read it twice before tucking it into the same folder that held every notice, every photo, every citation, my record of how justice, when patient, could outlast fury. 3 months after the Reform Charter passed, the HOA hosted its first Community Transparency Day. A barbecue, open books on folding tables, line items highlighted in green. Kids chalked the sidewalks, drawing flowers where once the no chalking rule had lived. I stood by the grill, flipping burgers beside Maria, who now chaired the board with quiet grace. Lisa dropped by mid-afternoon, sleeves rolled up, iced tea in hand. "You realize you just set a precedent, right?" she said, nodding toward the smiling crowd. "What kind?" I asked. "The kind that ends up cited in someone else's lawsuit," she said, half smiling. "Selective enforcement, open governance. Your case is going to travel farther than this street." That made me laugh. A low, genuine laugh I hadn't heard from myself in years. Tom joined us, pointing toward the park sign. The letters glowed gold in the sunset. Harmony Strip. "You know," he said, "they're planning a scholarship fund named after your wife. Board voted yesterday. First award goes to a kid studying community law." I didn't have words for that, only a nod that carried the weight of every long night spent gathering evidence by lamplight. Knowledge nugget number 7. Most HOA reform charters, once ratified, can be recorded with the county clerk, making them legally enforceable covenants that outlive individual boards. It's how communities stay transparent beyond personalities. Around 6, Maria tapped a microphone speckled with dew. Rain from earlier still beaded on the mesh, catching the orange light. "Tonight," she said, "we thank those who taught us that accountability and compassion can share the same table." The applause rolled through the field like a warm wind. I looked at the faces, neighbors who once avoided eye contact, now laughing, debating paint colors like it actually mattered again. That was reversal number 2 fully realized, leverage traded for reform, reform blossoming into something worth keeping. Before I close this chapter, I'll say this to you directly. If you believe I fought the right way, say a few words in the comments for your own friend who's facing a bully cloaked in bylaws. Subscribe so these stories reach others before they give up. And if you can, share this, because sometimes one case can teach 1,000 people how to stand their ground. That part's on us. As the sun dropped behind the houses, I took one last walk down Harmony Strip. The gravel crunched softly, same rhythm as the night it all began, but now the sound was calm, like breathing after a long run. A kid on a bike passed and called, "Hey, Mr. Dalton, they said you used to fight the HOA. That true?" I smiled. "Used to, kid. Now I just build fences that don't divide." He laughed and pedaled off, leaving a thin line of dust twisting in the amber light. Later, I sat on my porch with the last of Tom's lemonade, flipping through the old binder one final time. Each page still smelled faintly of ink and paper, proof that truth doesn't rot if you keep it in the sun. The final page was the lease, now fulfilled and voided by the new charter. I tore it gently down the middle and fed it to the fire pit. The paper curled, edges glowing, then collapsed into ash. The smoke drifted upward and out across the neighborhood, mixing with the scent of barbecue and spring grass. What changed after? Cheryl's restitution checks arrived monthly until the last was stamped paid in full. The HOA's insurer reinstated coverage under new ethics rules. City Hall cited Maple Ridge Estates as a model for transparent governance. And every April, the community holds a Neighbor Day barbecue where the first rule printed on the banner reads, "Listen before you fine." I watched the flames fade to coals, then whispered to the quiet street, "Promise kept." Next case? Maybe someday. But tonight, peace was enough.